Okay, so it's week 6, server-side scripting. So I checked Blackboard says I've got 33 of 44 assignment 1s. So if you are one of the 11 whose assignment 1 I do not have, you want to submit it by 5 o'clock today. So you can still get an 80%. Okay, beyond 5 o'clock, you're down to a max of 60%. Okay, so if I don't have your assignment, make sure you submit it. It's 15% of your final grade. So even if it's not completed or not quite in the state you totally want it in, getting some marks is better than getting no marks. Okay, so you want to get something in. You also need an assignment 1 because assignment 2 will be based on assignment 1. You're going to take assignment 1 and keep working on it. So if you're thinking, oh, I'll just skip assignment 1 and just do assignment 2 because it's worth more, well, you need to do assignment 1 in order to do assignment 2 anyway. I do want to spend a few minutes talking about next week's class. Okay. So we're not having a quiz today. There's no graded quiz. What I will do sometime in the next couple days is make a review quiz available for you guys on Blackboard that's ungraded. It will basically be just pulling from the various quizzes we've done so far. And you can take that quiz as many times as you like. It'll just randomly pull questions for you. Which leads me into next week's class. So next week is your midterm test. It's also worth 15%. Okay, so 15% for assignment 1, 15% for your midterm. There's 2 parts to the midterm. Okay. There is the fill in the blank part where the questions are drawn from the quizzes we've already done. And then there's a practical section. The practical section, you may have to build an application from scratch. You may have to download an application that I've started, which will contain errors and need a bunch of changes. And you'll have the rest of the time to work on that. Okay? The entire midterm is open book, so you can use a textbook, you can use Blackboard, you can use your own notes and files. You cannot search for answers online beyond Stack Overflow, Google. That's not the point of the exam. Okay? Your own file, all your own work and files, and Blackboard. You can access all of those things. I do not want to see my GitHub repositories. I'm going to say no. I mean, if you have them, you have them, but because the temptation is just too great, there will always be students in the room who will take stuff and just change the words and submit it back to me and say, here, this is my work on the test. Okay. If I see that, I'm not going to mark it. Okay. I'm not marking my own work changed by you. So no. Okay. There are also maybe a few people, I see a few people, at least one person who's in the morning section. You need to attend your proper section that you're registered in. You're in the morning section, you need to come to class Friday morning. In the afternoon section, you need to be here Friday afternoon, okay? Each section will get a different version of the test, and it will only be open for the hours of the class. So I know if you're registered in this section, which most of you are, I know you're probably gonna have a test in the morning in Jarrett's class anyway, but if anybody is here from the morning section next week, you need to show up in the morning. Not to the afternoon class. Okay? If you don't come to the morning class, you're forfeiting your chance to write the test. Questions about the midterm? No. Is it 50-50 split the marks? Yes. So the practical will count the same amount as the fill in the blank section. I suggest come early. I will be assigning the seats. There is always, we have a really crowded class. We've got, I think, 44 in the section. I think there are 45 chairs. And there's very often in tests, particularly in a really crowded room, the temptation of people to peek at other people's screens. So I will determine who sits where, okay? You won't be sitting with your friends next week.
And what in text, having notes, and having own files and file.
Sorry, it was confirmed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
I need Barry to hug, otherwise I can't do the test. Come on, man.
You might need a little snuggle halfway through.
Moral support.
All right. If you two need a hug, let's hug it out, bro, break. Then that's right. In front of the class, screen, laptop's closed. That's right. Okay. At exactly 1:25, we'll have a Charlie Berry hug it out, bro, break. If at 1:20 you need to go silently hug your best friend in the class, then maybe we can allow it. It'd be a first in college history, the first exam. Who knows? Maybe the results will go up. Maybe the endorphins will relax you and allow you to do better. Headphones are unfortunately not allowed because when I allow headphones, people start watching the YouTube lessons during the test. So watching the actual lessons and seeing how to do something during a test is not acceptable. Okay?
So can you watch those YouTube videos without headphones?
No. You cannot. Because they have a transcript. If you want to print off the transcript and bring it as notes, you can do that. I do not want to see you on the YouTube channel during the test. Cannot watch videos during a test. You have a week, you can watch the videos now. If you really want the video, play the video and download and print the transcript, and you can bring the transcript. It cannot be on YouTube during the test. Okay. And most of you are here on time. A few of you tend to come in late every week. You don't get any extra time if you show up late, right? We've got to submit. You have to submit everything by 2:50. Okay. Yep. Pardon? So in effect, can you print the video? No, you cannot. Don't tempt me to turn the playlist private. Imagine the anarchy that would ensue. Right. Okay. All right. So what we want to tackle today is of ever increasing importance. Probably a week doesn't go by where you don't hear about some major breach. What was the story this week? Anybody here? What was the big? Wasn't Facebook. That was last week.
Ah, okay, sorry.
Yeah, what was the Google Plus breach? Kimchi, do you know what happened? Can you tell us what happened? Sorry, can you say that again?
They set out Google Plus because it has some kind of security leak.
Right. So Google, through an internal audit, they realized their Google Plus site. They realized back in March that it had accidentally exposed over 500,000 people's Google profiles because by calling the Google Plus API, it was allowing an application not only to access an authenticated Google user's account, which was okay, that was the idea, but it allowed them to access their friends' accounts and profiles without permission. Google claims that they caught this problem themselves and that they're actually shutting down that API. They haven't done it yet, which is good because we actually kind of need it for today. We'll come up with, but we have nothing else to do Google authentication until they roll out something new. So we will wrap that in. So it happens all the time. There's another big headline on CBC's website earlier in the week, how a Canadian government sport agency was the target of a Russian hacker account. Okay, so that was also in the news. So we see this every week. Okay, so being able to build an application is not sufficient, but more and more of our responsibility is to also take proper steps to secure it. So Microsoft gives us a whole bunch of infrastructure that we're going to leverage and we're going to use. So here we get requests coming in to a server. But now sitting between our IIS server and our SQL server, we've got a whole bunch of layers. So we've got our .NET MVC app on the front end. We're using Entity Framework on the back end. But in between, we have two layers of infrastructure. One is called ASP.NET Identity. So this is specifically for web application. And it has, I'm not going to read you all the features that it has. You're going to read them off the slide yourself. But it has many of the standard security features we would expect a modern day web infrastructure, security infrastructure to have. This also sits on this middleware created by Microsoft called OWIN. This is not a web-only technology. We can use OWIN for doing authentication in any kind of Microsoft application. It could be a desktop app, mobile app, Windows directory, etc. So we're going to use both of these in here, as well as OWIN also has hooks for OAuth providers, such as Google, Facebook, Twitter, obviously Microsoft Sign In, LinkedIn. So our goal today, we're going to do several things. We want to make it so that we want to get users to be able to sign up and log into the MVC Music Store, number one. We want to look at how do we control access to parts of the application. So only either authenticated users or even better, users with certain permissions can make changes to certain parts of the store. Right now, everything's public. Right? As long as you get to the site, you can do anything you want. There, you can add, edit, delete. So we've got to look at access control. We also have to look at, and we'll talk more about this, we also have to look at SSL, which is something that probably some of you know a little bit about. Well, everybody needs to know about SSL, why it's important, and how we enable it. Basically, on every web app you ever build for the rest of your life, you should have SSL, and there's some good reasons. And then we'll look at how do we integrate OAuth. So that's largely based on this tutorial. So the link's here. So this tutorial is a few years old. I think it's from 2015. But this is basically what we want to do. This is creating a brand new app, and then how do we use OAuth sign-in providers, let people log in with any one of those accounts. We don't need a new app. We're going to integrate this into our music store. You can log in with the username and password that's stored in an SQL server, or you can authenticate, at least, I think we'll probably have time to do Google sign-in. And you guys will tackle one of the other sign-ins in assignment 2, okay, on your own. It's going to be pretty similar. So that link is here for you guys as a reference. And finally, we're going to have to talk a little bit about this. Again, something, today's the last day of your life. If you don't know what the OWASP Top 10 is, you're going to know by 3 o'clock. It'll be the last day of your life. You don't know what this is. All right. So fire up your music store. I'll try and run mine. I'm not sure what's going on here. And you'll also want to open Management Studio. Bear with me for a second. Start. Can you import? No, you have to download. You can't. No, no, no. Okay, so here's our site. So we haven't really looked at this. So we actually get, because we chose individual user accounts at the time we set the project up, we actually get register and login links. And if you click them, we actually have functioning pages. Now, if your music store is tied to my database, you don't need to create any user accounts. I've already created them. I've created a couple accounts. I'll write them on the board and you can use those credentials. Okay. If you are using your own database, then what I want you to do is go ahead and register 2 different accounts. Create an admin account and create a regular user account. Here are the accounts I've already created. So if you're tied to my database, you can just use these logins. You don't need to register. It does require a strong password with at least 1 upper, 1 lowercase, 1 digit, and 1 special character. And I believe the default character minimum length is 6 characters. The same password for both accounts I created. Actually, wait, who's using their own database? Okay. Actually, Barry, can I pick on you? Do you have an HDMI port in your machine? All right. Okay, we won't ask Barry. Another volunteer? All right, do you want to come on up? Sorry, can you remind me your name again? Jamin. Okay. And Jamin, have you opened up Management Studio as well? Yeah. Okay, great. Okay, so my video stream. Well, I'll have to describe what's going on here. If you want to plug in the HDMI cable. Okay. So if we see the list of tables here, these are the original tables in the music store script. So let's go, and if you want to just create first an admin account. Doesn't matter. You can make your own or use mine. Okay, and then a strong password, so minimum 6 characters, an upper, a lowercase, a number, and a special character. Register. So we'll see a couple things happen here. Number 1, see the nav bar. Right? Register, login are gone. His username is here, and it says log off. Go back to Management Studio and click the refresh button. Yeah, and expand your tables. So now we've got 5 new tables that start with ASP.NET. So this is the ASP.NET. Thank you very much, Shane. So this is the package working for us. As soon as we try to create the first user account, if those tables don't exist, ASP.NET Identity will automatically build them in your database for you. So we can modify these tables if we need to. Just open up my database. So we're not using all of them. We're going to use 3 of the 5 tables. So for now, the only table that's been used in Jamin's database when you first sign up is this one, ASP.NET users. So here are the columns. Notice the ID value is not numeric here. So this is relevant because if we want to tie data in other tables to a specific user, that foreign key will actually have to be 128 character varchar rather than an integer as we're used to having. Okay? So you've got fields for email. The password is automatically hashed. It's also salted. That's the security stamp value. Why do we want to not only hash a password, but also salt it? What does that do? No. If we hash a password and don't salt it, what will happen if 2 users enter the same password? The hash will be the same. So what does the salt do? Right, so the salt generates a random string, and that string is used in computing the hash value. So for example, where's my admin? So here's my admin account. Here's my hashed password, but it's also given a security stamp, so a salt value. So if somebody else enters the same password, the hash values will always be unique. And we want to hash passwords. We don't want to encrypt them. Why is that? Hint, really good test question. Right, because encryption can be decrypted, whereas hash values one way. There's no way to ever unhash or see the plain text value again. That's why what happens on an application when you forget your password? What do you have to do? You got to reset it, right? Because there's no way to retrieve and show you the original password. Can't be retrieved once it's hashed. So our users are stored here. We have other fields. We can say whether we can enable 2-factor authentication if we want, where when a user signs up, we either send them an email, a phone call, or text message, and they have 5 minutes to confirm their sign up. We can lock the accounts out. We could also add other fields to this, right? So maybe this is not going to work for us as a registration form because there's other information we need. We want a user's address. We need their age. We need something else from them. We would have to add it to our form. Also add it to our ASP.NET users table, as well as add it to the controller that manages and models that manage this stuff. We've got a few other tables here we're going to need. We're going to need the roles table and the user roles. We're not going to worry about user claims or user logins. If you're working in your own database, actually, I just have to copy this script onto Blackboard for you. I want you to run this script, which I will copy over. Let me jump into my morning section, copy this over for you. So step 1 is create an administrator account for yourself like we do on Jamin's account. That builds the tables and gives you 1 record in ASP.NET users. Just give me a second to copy this script. The next thing we want to do is set up 2 different roles in the ASP.NET roles table. We want an administrator role, and we want a customer role, and then we want to take the account we just created and make that account an administrator. So I'll just copy this. Okay, so if you refresh your week 6 folder on Blackboard now and scroll to the very bottom, again, you only have to do this if you're working with your own database. If you're working with My Music Store, I've already done this, so there's no need to do it again. Just copy those 3 lines. It creates an administrator role with the value of 1. It creates a customer role with the value of 2. And then it will take your current account that you've just created and make that user an administrator. So just copy, paste it into a query window in Management Studio, execute the script. So even though Microsoft gives us these tables, it doesn't predefine any roles for us because the roles depend on what application we're building. For the music store, we have administrators and customers. We are building a version of Blackboard. We'd have students and faculty. So it is up to us as the developer to define what those roles are. Just copy that, run it in Management Studio. Copy it, paste it into a new query window. Click the execute button. Once you've done this, I want you to make another account for yourself. So that account will be not an administrator. So I've got these 2 accounts. This is my admin account. This is my non-admin account. And we want our music store to behave differently depending on if I'm logged in as an admin or logged in as a customer, right? Administrator should be able to do certain things that customers have no access to. So if you've registered, click log out. When you click log out, the hello and your username and the log off will go away. Register and log in should reappear in your nav bar. So just go back to register, make a second account. You can use the same password if you want. Doesn't matter because the hashing and the security stamp will ensure that value is unique in the database. So now I can log in with either account. Log in with this account as an administrator. It says hello admin. Or I can log in to my customer account. Both of them will work. So I just want you, if you're in your own database, have 2 accounts, and that first one you've created as an administrator using. That's simple, those statements. Now, we may not want public registration. So right now, the way that this works is anybody can come to our site, click the register link, and create an account for themselves. Well, if we're building a store, that's probably fine because we want people to come create accounts and give us their money. If we're building a site like Blackboard, well, in Blackboard, there's no register. There is a register, but that's a private function. You can't self-register. An administrator has to create your account and my account. So that creation of new users happens on a page that's private. So this is one of the first things we need to figure out when we're building an application. Who is creating the user accounts? Is it public and anybody who comes here can create an account? Or is that something that has to be done behind the scenes by an administrator in the site? In which case we want to remove that register link and make sure that this page, this register page, is not private or is not public. Okay, so now we've got 2 accounts. So here is your first task. How do we make it so that our albums and all of the methods and views in albums are private. If you're an anonymous user, you can't access any of that stuff. This shouldn't take very long to find. Let's see if you can find the answer. Jake? Okay, and where would that go? Okay, well, let's see. So we used authorize is the right command, so where would we put it? You're suggesting, sorry, in the views or the controller? Okay, so if we go to our albums controller, so where should we put it if we want after namespace? So basically, it's an annotation for the controller class. So right above the controller declaration on line 13. If we use the authorize annotation, specifies access to a controller or a method is restricted to users who have met authorization requirement. So let's try that and build and see how this works. So I'm not logged in right now. You can tell because my nav bar doesn't show my username and log off. So right now I'm anonymous. So let's try to load our albums index. So it automatically kicked us over here. Blackboard would do the same thing. If I grab a URL in Blackboard and copy it and jump over to another browser where I'm not logged in, right, prompts me to, well, I guess I am logged in. Maybe we'll try a private browser where I'm definitely not logged in. Okay, Blackboard, that's interesting. I think that's a Chrome problem, actually. Didn't actually end my sign-on session yet. Chrome is persisting that identity. Not very secure, really. So this does several things. With that one little authorize command, first of all, it's locked me out. Second of all, where did it take me? Right, took me to log in, so we can control where we send the users. The third thing is, though, notice I've got a query string on the end of my URL. So what is this telling us? Right, that this was the page I tried to access, but I couldn't do the authorization. But once I log in, if I supply a valid credential now, it actually takes me back to where I tried to go before I logged in. Blackboard would do the same. So it knows where I wanted to go, and then it lets me in once I'm authorized. I shouldn't say authorized. I should probably say authenticated. We'll need to talk about those. So that's pretty easy. Now, any method within albums should be private now. If I go to album/create, and I get bounced to the login screen, any album, go to edit, the entire thing is now private. with one line of code. So that's really simple. Now, not completely ideal though, because there's actually one page. I would suggest there's one method in our albums controller. We look at the list of methods. There's one of them that actually should be public. Which one do you think we should make public? Well, let's look at index for a minute. So here's our index. At least as it is right now, should this be public or private? Right. Okay, so we have two options. We could make this public, but then we're going to need some logic around all of the links, right? Blackboard has this, right? Like we can look at the same item in Blackboard, but because we're in different, right, we see it differently. So that's one way of doing it. So we could make index public, but then we'll need to write a bunch of logic in the views, right? What would, I think I heard it from back here, this corner of the room. What was the other suggestion? Yeah, maybe we want to make the details view. I would suggest we don't really need the details view as an administrator, right, as private, because we have create, edit, delete, and index. This is really just read only. So we could make this one public, remove the edit link, and when we come back to this after reading week, we can replace those links with like an add to cart function instead, so user could shop. So we can make this page public, but all the other ones private. Oh, like not that your suggestion's bad, we could do it on index as well. It would be by the album. So we'll make a public version of this. Well, I guess we have two ways we can handle the index. One is we use the same view and we write logic here and up there, right? If you're an administrator, you see the links. If you're not, you don't. Or we make a totally different view of all of the albums that's more kind of like customer facing. So we'll make another like an album/shop view, and that one would be public. And then when you click an album, it will take you into this view, which will then have an add to cart button with a quantity. Adrian, you have a question? They can get to the URL. Yes, they could get to the URL. So then we're relying on logic in the view. Yeah, so you can do it either way. My general feeling is we're probably better to have entirely separate views in this case. One that's for one that's public, one that's private. There's not a right and a wrong, so either way, you could do it with two separate views, or you could have one view with a whole bunch of logic so that the view behaves differently depending on who our user is.
Just clone the index and take everything away. And as it's not basically is what the customers would get, and then the admin would get the one we have now.
Actually, even easier. I won't finish the process. So we could just go to albums. We could do that. I won't complete the process, but I'll just show you, Charlie. You're on the right idea. If we say add view, so we'll call this one, I don't know, whatever. The template is a list. It'll write all the code where it passes in the IEnumerable and uses a for each loop. So we can just do it this way, right? Here's our model, a list of type album. So it'll generate a new view that right now looks exactly like index, but we've just given it a different name. So really easy to make two versions of this page. And then on the shop page, we can just delete the links. So it's a totally separate URL and method. So there's a few different ways you could accomplish it. Either use the existing index view and wrap the links in logic, or create two views. I would suggest probably we'll create a different view entirely. A, it's more secure. Here's the other thing. Right now we're using one layout file. In reality, we're probably going to have different layouts, usually for like the site admin panel and the public. So if we want actually different layouts, like this page has like a tabular layout, right? It's just a table. So this works fine for an administrator for viewing quickly and managing the albums. We probably want to give it a better format in our store, right? This may not be how we want customers to see the albums in a table. So we may want a totally different layout to the page as well. So I would suggest different views for the public and the administrator is more common most of the time. Generally, the scaffold layout works fine for an administrator because they just need to be able to manage their data, right? It doesn't have to be anything fancy for them. Whereas the customers, they need a front end that doesn't really look like this, I would suggest. So I won't create this one, but that's probably how we do it. So for now, though, we just want to make the details view public. We have no way to get here yet, but we'll add that in a couple of weeks where we'll build the shopping experience. So what would we do so that this view is still public? Because right now, all of the methods in this controller are private. You can't get to any of them unless you're logged in. We could, but in fact, we probably want somebody doesn't even need to be in a role, right? Because typically a site won't force someone to authenticate until they're ready to buy, right? If we forced people to sign up just to see the products, we probably wouldn't get very many customers. So Adrian, technically that would work, yes. From a business case scenario, we might want to find another option. Right, so how do we allow no authorization at all on the details method? Again, we need one line of code. So we want a separate rule from the rest of the controller. There's actually a couple of different ways we could do it here. Anybody have a suggestion? Okay, that's one. One is we can override the authorization. We add that annotation above our details method. It says ignore the authorization that we put at the top of the controller, just for this method. So if we try that, well, let's see. So if I log off, first I'll try to go to the details method and then we'll try some of the other methods. So if I just paste and try to go to album details, so I'm anonymous again, I've logged out. So I can load this view now. So that's successfully overridden our controller level rule. If I try to edit, can't call edit. If I try to go to index, can't go to index. So we can override, that's one way of doing it. The other way that I thought somebody mentioned alternatively is we could say allow anonymous. We don't need both of these, either one of them will work. That is explicitly saying make this method publicly available. Well, yes, because This can be rules-based, depending on certain roles. This means explicitly this method is public. This means ignore whatever rule we declare up here. So we may have the opposite scenario where we have a controller with 20 methods, most of which should be public. Well, let's say 2 of them have to be private. In that case, we write nothing up here. We just put authorize above whichever method should be private. So authorize can be at the controller level, or it can be at a single method. We can write it. So either one of these works. Allow anonymous or override. I'll maybe do allow anonymous because it's more explicit that we're making this public. That would make that one method private. So you couldn't access that one page unless you were logged in. No, so everything else would be public except the one you say authorize for. So that was fairly easy, right? 2 lines of code, and we could easily make, at a page-by-page level, we can decide, is it public or private? Still a couple more small things we need to do, though. We'll take a break soon. Here's one problem. Well, I'd say there's 2 problems. I'm going to log back in as a customer. So what's our issue here? Right, who am I logged in as? Customer. So right now, there's a reason this lesson is called Authentication and Authorization, right? These are related concepts, but they're not the same thing. And hint, yes, there will be a question on the midterm about this. Right? What's the difference between authentication and authorization? They're related, but they're not exactly the same. We've so far done authentication, but there's no authorization. Charlie, what's the difference? Okay.
An authorization, you're an admin, you have the ability to edit everything.
Exactly. Stephen, you want to add to that?
No, I'm basically just confirming who you are and your.
Absolutely. So authentication is our first level. It's about identity. Identifying who this user is so we know who they are. So that's what we've got right now. As long as you identify yourself, you can go ahead and add, edit, delete in our store, as long as you have a login. But that's really the first level. We use this, and then the second level is authorization. First, tell us who you are. Now that we know who you are, our application has to decide 2 things. What are you allowed to see? And also, what are you allowed to do? And these are 2 separate questions. So for example, in Blackboard, to get to this page, you have to first be authenticated. You must have a username and password in Georgian's Active Directory to even get here. But we can both look at the week 6 folder. We can both see this graphic. But now, based on our authorization, there's logic in the view that gives me that little icon, which I can click, and I have this context menu, which you guys don't have, right? So we can actually see the same things, but I can do additional functions that you don't have based on our roles. So this is another level. So really, what we've done here is a start with the authentication, but it's not quite sufficient. Because anybody that has a login can go ahead and change that's great, I'll go in, set all the prices to 1 cent, buy a bunch of music, check out, and then you can set the prices back. So we need to add another layer to this. It's super easy to do. So in our controller, we just have to add something into the authorize command. Roles. Is it admin? Right, it's got to match exactly the name that we put in the table, which is administrator. That's the name of the role in the database. So that's the name of the role. We need here. It's roles plural, so if we have multiple roles, we just separate them with a comma. You know, we have multiple levels of user that should be able to access this. We would just put them in. So now we're not only authenticating, requiring authentication, but we're authorizing. And a user has to be in a certain role to be able to do this. So now as a customer, I can log into the site, but I can't modify any of the album data. I have to be an administrator.
Not the authorized one. Thank you.
So compile your site, try and log in as a customer, and then click the albums link. It should kick you back to the login screen. If you log out and then log in with an admin account, you should be able to still change all of the album data. So as a customer now, I'll try and reload this page. I'm logged in, but I can't access the albums because I don't have the right permissions. If I log out and log back in now as an admin user, now I can go here. So we've added both authentication and authorization. So what have we added? Oh, we added 2 lines of code to the whole thing, which is super efficient if you ask me. What's that? You wish. But go take a break. We got more to do when we come back.